The Trust of Family Drama. Welcome to our channel, everyone. Today, I have a gripping family drama to share with you. Imagine this during a peaceful family dinner. My daughter-in-law stood up and publicly accused me of being a controlling person in front of everyone. But what she didn't know was that I held a secret, a shocking truth that would change our family forever. Trust me, you won't believe how everything unfolded. So, settle in and stay with me until the very end to discover the powerful revelation that turned this family dinner upside down. Marianne Rhodes had been planning this dinner for weeks. If you had seen her bustling around her suburban home in Bloomfield Hills, you might have thought she was preparing for a royal banquet. She had her reasons. Her only son, Ethan, was coming over with his wife, Georgia, and their newborn daughter, Lily. To Marianne, little Lily was a bright new spark in a life still overshadowed by the loss of her husband, Lawrence, 2 years prior. Everyone said Marianne was coping well. She kept the house spotless, the gardens pruned, and her schedule full of social events. But the truth was, she often felt as though she was drifting in some in-between place, neither fully grieving nor entirely healed. On good days, she prayed for clarity. On bad days, she just wanted to hold her granddaughter and forget the rest of the world. Despite her mixed emotions, Marianne loved hosting. She'd inherited the knack for it from her late mother, who had taught her that good food and a welcoming home could soothe the soul. Tonight, the table was set with her finest china, a pattern of tiny blue forget-me-nots that glistened in the evening light. Silverware caught the soft glow from a vintage chandelier overhead, a piece that Lawrence and Marianne had purchased on a trip to France many years ago. The memory of that adventure brought a faint smile to her lips. She made sure the flower arrangements, fresh lilies, of course, were centered just right. The smell of rosemary and garlic wafted from the kitchen, a hint of the roasted lamb that would soon be served. Ever since Ethan had married Georgia, a tension had grown in their family. Subtle at first, like uneasy glances or awkward silences, but it had begun to intensify. Georgia was friendly enough on the surface, quick to compliment Marianne's cooking and ask about her day. Yet, beneath the politeness, Marianne often sensed judgment, or, worse, a veiled hostility. Marianne had tried repeatedly to build a relationship with Georgia. She'd invited her to lunch, suggested shopping trips, and even offered to help with wedding planning before they were married. Georgia always had an excuse: too busy with work, already had plans with friends, or simply not feeling up to it. Each rejection stung, but Marianne persisted, believing that patience would eventually win Georgia over. There were warning signs about Georgia's spending habits that Marianne had noticed early on. Ethan, who had always been financially prudent like his parents, suddenly started wearing designer clothes. Their wedding had been lavish beyond what Marianne thought reasonable. And once, while visiting their new home, Marianne had glimpsed a stack of shopping bags from luxury stores tucked behind the couch. When she'd casually mentioned them, Georgia had quickly changed the subject. Adding another layer to the tension was the quiet rumor of a family inheritance. When Lawrence passed away, he left a trust fund earmarked for Ethan's future, and specifically for any grandchildren they might have. Only Marianne and the estate lawyer knew the full details. Marianne had sensed a certain curiosity from Georgia about that money, noticing how her daughter-in-law's eyes lit up whenever the topic of finances arose. But Marianne, wanting to believe in the best of people, had pushed her suspicions aside. All day, Marianne had tried to calm herself, reminding her heart that this was a celebration, a welcome dinner to officially toast baby Lily's arrival into the world. She prayed for a smooth evening with no snide remarks, no veiled criticisms, no pointed comments about how she hovered too much or offered unsolicited advice. For all her anxieties, Marianne could have never predicted what was coming. She certainly didn't know that by the end of the night, she'd be forced to step forward and shatter the uneasy peace they had all maintained. But that's how life goes, isn't it? Sometimes the calm you so desperately hope for is just the stillness before the biggest storm of your life. The rest of the guests arrived gradually. Marianne's brother, Brendan, stepped in first, wearing his usual affable grin and carrying a bottle of Merlot under one arm. Brendan's wife, Corinne, followed behind him, balancing a casserole dish swathed in foil. A few close friends from the neighborhood trickled in, greeting Marianne with warm hugs. For the first half hour, the house filled with the hum of conversation. Everyone marveled at the recent upgrades to the living room, a new coat of pale green paint, and a rearranged layout that Marianne had orchestrated to make the space more open for visitors. Marianne, this place looks fantastic, Corinne said, her eyes scanning the polished floors and the glimmer of the chandelier. I still remember the day you and Lawrence brought that chandelier home from Paris. You two were so proud of that find. Marianne offered a wistful smile. Yes, it has a lot of memories attached, she replied. I'm glad to see it shining so beautifully. Makes me feel like he's still part of these celebrations. Brendan gently patted Marianne's arm, sensing his sister's mixture of pride and longing. He'd be proud of you. How you're managing everything, he said. Then he changed the subject lightly. So, is Ethan bringing Lily? I can't wait to meet my grandniece. Yes, they should be here soon, Marianne said, hoping her voice didn't betray her nerves. She excused herself to put the finishing touches on the dinner spread in the dining room as she arranged the last of the place settings. Brendan followed her into the dining room. So, how are things really going with Georgia? He asked quietly. Marianne hesitated, adjusting a napkin unnecessarily. It's complicated. I try to be welcoming, but she keeps me at arm's length. Especially now with Lily. Brendan frowned. I've noticed it too, the way she looks at you sometimes. I just hope tonight goes smoothly. That makes two of us. Marianne sighed. A few minutes later, a slight commotion by the front door announced Ethan and Georgia's arrival. Marianne felt her heart skip a beat. This was the moment she'd waited for her first official dinner with the entire extended family, celebrating baby Lily. She rushed to greet them, arms open, face lit with genuine excitement. Ethan was carrying Lily in a baby carrier draped with a pink blanket. Georgia stood beside him, swaddled in an elegant navy blue dress that looked both stylish and functional enough to accommodate a newborn's inevitable messes. Mom, this is great, Ethan said, kissing Marianne on the cheek. Everything looks, wow, it's like a magazine spread in here. Marianne beamed, her eyes drifting over to Lily. The baby's tiny hand peeked out from under the blanket, clasping and unclasping in the reflexive way newborns do. May I hold her? Marianne asked gently, her voice tinged with hopeful awe. She was so eager to cradle that little life. Georgia's lips pressed into a polite smile, but her tone was more clipped than welcoming. She's just fallen asleep. Maybe after dinner. We really don't want to wake her up now. Her words hung in the air, and though they were politely phrased, Marianne could sense the underlying dismissal. The hush was brief but telling. In that moment, Ethan caught his mother's disappointed look and stepped in. Mom, I promise you'll get plenty of time with her later. She had a fussy afternoon, so we're just grateful she's sleeping now. His voice was gentle but firm, bridging the gap between his wife and mother. Marianne nodded, appreciating Ethan's intervention. Of course. Sleep is precious at this stage. Let's get you both settled. Dinner is almost ready. She led them into the living room, where the other guests were waiting, feeling a mixture of disappointment and resignation. Despite her best intentions and meticulous preparations, the evening was already showing signs of strain. The few words Georgia had spoken already hinted at the friction that would soon surface, and not just between mother and daughter-in-law, but in front of everyone. Dinner began on a promising note. The rosemary and garlic lamb was tender, the roasted vegetables perfectly caramelized, and the conversation for the first quarter hour flowed with relative ease. Everyone commented on how adorable Lily was, and even Georgia joined in with a few stories of first-week parenting challenges. Marianne listened intently, offering an empathetic ear. She saw it as a positive sign maybe the tensions could be put aside tonight for the sake of family bonding. But if you've ever attended a family gathering where there's a suppressed conflict simmering beneath the pleasantries, you know that such peace can be fragile. Marianne felt on edge, alert to every flicker of Georgia's expressions, every shift in Ethan's posture. She also sensed that her guests, Brendan, Corinne, and a few of her neighbors, were picking up on the undercurrent. They darted quick glances at one another whenever Georgia made a curt remark or dismissed Marianne's small attempts at conversation. Ethan, to his credit, was trying to maintain harmony. When Georgia snapped at Marianne for asking too many questions about Lily's feeding schedule, he smoothly changed the subject to a funny story from work. When Marianne offered to refill Georgia's water glass and Georgia tensely replied she could do it herself, Ethan quickly asked his uncle about his recent fishing trip. Still, the meal progressed. Brendan made a light-hearted toast about how lucky Lily was to join such a loving family, sharing a couple of sweet anecdotes from Ethan's childhood. Corinne raised her glass in agreement, praising Marianne's role as a mother. Marianne felt a hint of relief. Perhaps all her worrying would prove unnecessary, and the evening would remain cordial. Then dessert arrived, lemon custard tarts topped with fresh berries, Marianne's signature treat. As she handed them out, she saw Georgia whisper something to Ethan. He looked momentarily uncomfortable but said nothing. Marianne chose to ignore it, focusing on swirling whipped cream onto each tart. But when she returned to her seat, she couldn't help noticing Georgia's brows furrowed in what seemed like irritation. Is it the dessert? Did I put too much sugar? Marianne wondered, trying to guess the source of Georgia's mood. Finally, Corinne clinked her glass. A toast, she said cheerily, her voice bright, to baby Lily, who has filled our hearts with so much joy already. Everyone lifted their glasses, and Marianne's heart swelled. Corinne continued, and to Marianne for hosting such a lovely dinner in her honor. Lawrence would be so proud to see this family coming together to celebrate Lily's arrival. At first, the moment felt perfect. Glasses were raised, and Marianne tried to anchor herself in that flash of communal warmth. But then Georgia stood, glass in hand, and the atmosphere shifted. She held a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'd like to make a toast, too. The entire table fell silent, the hush of anticipation descending like a curtain. To Marianne, Georgia began, her voice carrying a tonal undercurrent that spelled danger. The matriarch who insists on controlling every single detail of this family's life, even down to the last cent of the inheritance. The words erupted in the dining room like a sonic boom. Marianne felt her pulse lurch. The other guests, mid-sip, froze. Brendan's eyes flashed confusion. Corinne's mouth parted in silent shock. Ethan immediately set down his glass with a thud. Georgia, he said, his voice tight with warning. This is not the time or place for this discussion. But Georgia was undeterred. When is the time, Ethan? When your mother decides it's appropriate, when she gives her permission. Her voice rose slightly. That's exactly my point. Everything happens on Marianne's terms. Marianne, torn between outrage and mortification, set down her fork with trembling fingers. This was exactly what she had feared, a public confrontation she wasn't prepared for. Despite all her careful planning, the storm had arrived, uninvited, at her perfectly arranged table. Time seemed to slow in the seconds after Georgia's explosive toast. Marianne felt as if every pair of eyes in the dining room had swiveled her way in unison, expecting her to respond, to do something. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. For years, she had tried to keep the peace, tucking away her own grievances in the name of family harmony. And now this was the moment she had dreaded, that everything was unraveling in front of her closest friends and relatives. Ethan's reaction was swift. He stood up, placing a hand on Georgia's arm. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Mom has done nothing but welcome you into this family. You can't just ambush her like this in front of everyone." Georgia pulled her arm away. "Of course you'd defend her. You always do. That's the problem. Ethan, you never stand up to her." Marianne rose from her seat, struggling to find her voice. "Georgia," she began, speaking slowly as though to maintain composure. "I'm not sure what you're implying, but this is hardly the time or place." Georgia let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Oh, please. You've been controlling since day one," she said, setting her glass down with a thud. "Don't pretend you haven't meddled in our finances and tried to dictate how Ethan and I raise Lily." She looked around the table, scanning faces as though searching for allies. "She's been holding on to some secret inheritance ever since her husband passed. But if you ask me, that money should help Ethan's family, my family, rather than sit in some hidden trust." Brendan cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Georgia, maybe we can talk about this later, in private. This is supposed to be a celebration for Lily." Georgia's gaze flicked to him, unyielding. "You think I didn't try, that I've tried talking to Marianne, but she won't budge. She's afraid I might misuse the funds or something." Ethan looked at his wife with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "Georgia, stop. You're making a scene. We can discuss our finances privately." But Georgia was unmoved. "Why, so your mother can continue to control everything behind closed doors. No, I think everyone should know what's really going on in this family." Marianne closed her eyes for a brief moment, summoning courage she didn't realize she'd need tonight. Then she opened them and walked to the microphone set up for after-dinner remarks. A small portable system she'd rented in anticipation of joyful toasts, never imagining it would be used for something like this. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the eyes around her. "All right," she said, her voice quieter than she intended. "If we're going to air this in public, then so be it." The hush in the room turned electric. From her peripheral vision, Marianne saw neighbors exchanging uncertain glances, and Corinne setting down her fork with trembling fingers. Georgia's lip curled, almost as though she relished the spectacle. "Keep it together, Marianne," she told herself. She clicked the microphone's power button, and a soft static crackled through the speakers. "Georgia," Marianne began, "since you've brought up the inheritance, let's discuss exactly what it is and why it exists." A part of her wanted to hide, to run, but she reminded herself of the love she had for her son and granddaughter, and the promise she'd made to Lawrence to protect them. "My husband left a trust. It was intended for Ethan's future and for Lily's education should we ever be blessed with a grandchild. It's not a slush fund for anyone to dip into. It is restricted for specific uses, ensuring that the money goes where Lawrence intended the welfare of his descendants." The click of silverware being set down echoed in the tense silence. George's expression darkened. "So you admit you're controlling how and when we can use it?" Marianne's own voice caught in her throat. "He set it up that way because he suspected, well, let's just say he worried about how it might be spent. It's true that I'm the trustee, but there are strict conditions. It's not to withhold from you, Georgia, or from Ethan. It's to protect all of us." Ethan moved toward Marianne. standing beside her in silent support. His presence gave her strength, and Marianne realized that despite Georgia's claims, her son wasn't blindly loyal to either side. He just wanted what was fair. A strange calm descended on Marianne the moment she committed to telling the full story. Perhaps it was the resolve that came with knowing the truth was the only way forward. No more half hints, no more unspoken tension. She leaned toward the microphone stand, adjusting it slightly so she could speak without wavering. Nearby, Ethan looked torn, his gaze flicking between his wife and his mother. Georgia's face flushed with agitation, but she appeared transfixed by what Marianne might say next. The dinner guests, eyes wide, seemed glued to their seats. "If you're still with me," Marianne said, giving a small, wry smile, "let me explain how we reached this point." She paused, recalling the moment after Lawrence's funeral when the estate lawyer had revealed the intricacies of the trust. "Lawrence and I built our lives from humble beginnings. We started with a tiny apartment, scraping together every bit of savings. Over the years, we created a comfortable life and wanted to ensure Ethan would be taken care of even if we were gone. The inheritance, or the trust, is more about safeguarding him and any children he might have. It's not about punishing anyone." Marianne locked eyes with Georgia, whose expression was unreadable, like a mixture of anger and fear. "When Ethan and Georgia got married, I never wanted to step on their toes. But as trustee, I did have to oversee how the trust would be managed and what it could be used for. I noticed certain expenditures, a new credit card, or additional loans that didn't align with the trust's guidelines. And yes, I questioned them, which may have made me look controlling, but I had a duty to protect Ethan and Lily's futures." She took a deep breath, deciding to reveal what she had previously kept private. "Georgia, I tried to speak with you about this 3 months ago. I invited you to lunch specifically to discuss the trust and how it could be used to help with Lily's future. You canceled at the last minute. I tried again 2 weeks later, and you said you were too busy. I've been trying to find a way to have this conversation privately, but you've avoided it." At that, Georgia's anger flared. "You're painting me like I'm some gold digger. I've done nothing but try to help Ethan and Lily. You're the one who meddles, calling him day and night, prying into our budget, acting like you own us." Ethan stepped forward. "Georgia, that's not fair. Mom has always been respectful of our space. She calls to check in, not to control. And when it comes to finances, she's only ever gotten involved when there was reason to be concerned." Marianne straightened her shoulders. "Georgia, I'm not calling you anything. I'm only pointing out the conditions of the trust. If you wanted to renovate your home or pay for Lily's future medical bills or education, the trust would help. No questions asked. But when I saw credit card statements for," she hesitated, unsure how much detail to share in front of their guests, "expensive personal items, I had to step in. I never told Ethan about it to spare him any distress. But I see now that might have been a mistake." If the tension had been thick before, now it felt almost solid. A hush enveloped the room, and Marianne suddenly realized she was trembling. She scanned the crowd, noticing for the first time that Corinne had tears welling up, and Brendan looked furious. She wondered if they had suspected something like this, or if they were as blindsided as she felt. "Stay calm, stay honest," she reminded herself. Georgia stood abruptly, arms folded. "Oh, so now you're going to list off my wrongdoings in front of everyone." Her tone dripped with bitterness. "Go ahead. Humiliate me. That's what you've always wanted to prove you're superior, the saintly mother who knows best." Marianne's voice caught for a moment. She didn't want to humiliate Georgia. She just wanted Ethan to see what was happening. She wanted clarity, a chance to clear the air they'd all been choking on for far too long. No one wants to humiliate you, she said gently, trying to diffuse the hostility. But the truth needs to be told. If you feel I'm controlling, I need you to understand why Lawrence structured the trust this way and why I've been protective. She let those words hang, aware that the next few moments might define her relationship with Ethan and Lily forever. A sharp cry broke the silence, and Marianne's eyes darted toward the baby carrier. Lily had awakened, startled by the rising voices and tension. In a swift motion, Ethan scooped Lily up, cradling her against his shoulder, trying to soothe her with gentle pats. Georgia instantly moved to Ethan's side, as though staking claim over both father and daughter. Marianne, still by the microphone, felt torn between wanting to run to Lily to calm her and needing to hold her ground. Continuing the conversation that had now reached a painful climax, Brendan was the first to speak, stepping away from the table to approach Marianne. Jassie's. This is a family matter, he announced to the room, his voice steady. Perhaps we should let our other guests have a moment in the living room while we talk privately. Corinne nodded quickly, and a hush of agreement passed through the neighbors. They rose from their seats, offering apologies and subdued farewells. Nobody wanted to be a spectator to a full-blown familial meltdown, especially one as fraught as this. As the door closed behind the last of the guests, Georgia's tone turned sharp once more. Perfect. Now you can tear me apart without an audience. She held her arms out, and Ethan, after a moment of hesitation, transferred Lily into Georgia's embrace. The baby's cries quieted a bit, but the atmosphere remained thick with tension. Marianne stepped away from the microphone, letting the device slump in its stand as if it, too, was defeated. I don't want to tear anyone apart, Marianne said, her voice taut. She glanced at Ethan, searching his eyes for some measure of understanding. I've tried so hard to be respectful. Respectful, Georgia snapped, a tremor in her voice. You've criticized every decision I've made about Lily. You show up at our house unannounced. You call Ethan constantly. I see the way you look at me. Oh, and now you're insinuating that I'm financially irresponsible, or worse, that I married Ethan for money. Ethan's brow furrowed. Georgia, can we not do this in front of Lily? Let's try to keep our voices down. He looked at his mother, his expression pleading for calm. Mom, please, let's talk about the trust in a rational way. Tell me exactly what's going on. Marianne nodded, grateful for her son's measured approach. Before you married Georgia, there were already some red flags. You had asked for an early release from the trust for a few personal expenses. The trustee myself needed to see proof of how that money would be used. Suddenly, I started seeing these new charges on your joint account high-end stores, extravagant dinners, fancy trips. I said nothing at first because I trusted your judgment. Ethan, I figured you'd communicate with me if there was a legitimate reason. She paused, scanning Georgia's face for any sign of remorse, but all she saw was seething anger. But then I discovered attempts to bypass the trust's conditions. Georgia had tried to contact our estate lawyer multiple times, searching for ways to break into the principal. When I confronted her privately, she told me to stay out of it. Georgia's cheeks flushed. I have every right to talk to an estate lawyer about my husband's inheritance. It belongs to us. It belongs to Ethan, Marianne clarified, and to Lily. It's not a free-for-all. That was Lawrence's intention, not mine. He wanted to prevent exactly the kind of reckless spending he feared. Ethan looked between his mother and wife, his expression hardening with resolve. Okay, enough. I need to see everything, all the documents, statements, communication with the lawyer. No more secrets from either of you. He handed Lily back to Georgia. I won't be kept in the dark about my own finances anymore. Marianne nodded, feeling both relief and apprehension. I have everything organized in the study. We can go through it together. Ethan turned to Georgia. And I expect complete honesty from you, too. If there are credit cards or accounts I don't know about, now is the time to tell me. Georgia's defiance seemed to falter slightly under Ethan's direct gaze. Fine, she murmured, avoiding eye contact. But this isn't just about money, Ethan. It's about respect and independence. Marianne watched the exchange, sensing that the revelations she was about to share would blow their already fragile relationship to pieces. But there was no turning back now. The truth, however painful, was their only path forward. Ethan and Marianne retreated into the study, a room filled with leather-bound books and mementos of Lawrence's life. Georgia followed, holding a now sleepy Lily in her arms, pacing near the window to lull the baby back into a deeper slumber. Brendan lingered in the hallway, presumably standing guard in case tensions escalated again. Marianne could hear Corinne quietly collecting dishes in the dining room. There would be plenty to clean up from this disastrous evening. Despite the turmoil roiling in her, Marianne felt a pang of nostalgia as she entered the study. She remembered the nights when Lawrence would sit at the oak desk, meticulously planning their financial future, determined to ensure that Ethan would never have to face the hardships they once did. Now, that very desk would bear witness to the shocking truths Marianne was about to reveal. Here, she said softly, pulling open a lower drawer and taking out a thick folder. She placed it on the desk, motioning for Ethan to sit. Georgia halted in her pacing, glancing over as if compelled by morbid curiosity. Marianne flipped through the folder, extracting statements, transaction logs, and a letter from the estate lawyer. These show various charges and attempts at withdrawing trust funds. Look at the dates and amounts. They started just after you were married. Ethan. Ethan's eyes scanned the pages, and with each line, his face grew taut. He paused at a credit card statement that featured multiple high-priced transactions in the same month, mostly at luxury boutiques and jewelry stores. I don't remember approving any of this, he murmured, darting a look at Georgia. Did we spend this much on wedding expenses? Georgia shrugged, adjusting Lily in her arms. It's not all wedding expenses. Some of it was after. We needed furniture. We needed things to make our house a home. You told me it was okay if we put a little bit on credit, that we'd pay it off eventually. Yes, but that's not what this is, Ethan said, pointing at a series of designer brand charges. These are personal luxury items, and here, he moved his finger to another page. There's an application for a line of credit in my name that I never signed. His voice rose slightly with incredulity. Georgia, did you forge my signature? Georgia's face paled. I just thought it would be easier than bothering you with the paperwork. You were so busy with your new promotion, and I knew we'd need the credit for what? Ethan interrupted, his tone hardening. Designer handbags, weekend getaways, none of this was discussed with me. Marianne stepped back slightly, giving Ethan space to process this betrayal. She had expected anger, but the hurt in his eyes was profound. He turned to Marianne, face reddening. You said you confronted her about this. Marianne nodded. I tried to. She insisted it was all legitimate, and the trust's rules only allow releases for specific life necessities, educational costs, medical bills, property investments, improvements that boost your long-term financial stability, or essential living expenses if you're in dire need. None of these charges met that criterion. The trust wouldn't authorize them, so Georgia tried to find loopholes. Georgia let out a bitter laugh. Can we drop the moral outrage? I know plenty of families who tap into their inheritance for upgrades and comforts. Are you saying we should live like paupers while you hoard everything, Marianne? A fire rose in Marianne's chest, but she kept her tone measured for Ethan's sake. There's a difference between necessary improvements and excessive luxury. Lawrence wanted to ensure your long-term security, not indulge short-term impulses. She glanced at Ethan. Your father saw too many stories of people who lost everything because they spent recklessly. Looking up from the documents, Ethan's voice trembled with betrayal. Georgia, we could have talked about this. Why try to break the trust behind my back? To Marianne's surprise, Georgia's expression momentarily flickered with something like vulnerability. She looked down at Lily, her lips pressed together. I'm not the villain here, she said softly. I grew up with nothing. My parents were always struggling. I saw them fight daily over bills. I never wanted that for us. She shrugged, though her eyes brimmed with resentment. I guess I overcorrected. Ethan's eyes showed a mixture of sympathy and disappointment. He walked over to Georgia, gently touching her arm. I understand why you felt that way, but this, he gestured at the financial documents, this isn't the way. We need to be honest with each other. We're partners. Georgia. Marianne bit her lip, feeling a mixture of empathy and frustration. Was Georgia simply misguided? Or was she truly unscrupulous? The lines between the two could be razor thin. Before Marianne could respond, Ethan stepped away from Georgia, picking up the folder from the desk. I need time to process this, he said, looking from Georgia to Marianne. But I also need all the facts. Mom, is there anything else I should know about the trust or our finances? Marianne hesitated, then shook her head. No, what's in that folder is everything I know. But Ethan, I think you should check your credit report. Make sure there aren't other accounts you don't know about. Ethan nodded grimly, a new understanding dawning on his face. He held out his arms for Lily, and Georgia reluctantly transferred the sleeping baby to him. We'll stay here tonight, he said quietly. It's late, and Lily needs her rest. Tomorrow, I'll look into this more thoroughly. In the quiet that followed, Marianne felt a storm of emotions swirl inside her, a glimmer of sympathy for Georgia, a surge of protectiveness for Ethan and Lily, and a sobering realization that the night's revelations might only be the beginning of a deeper family rift. But for now, at least, the truth was in the open, and that was a start. The hours after the confrontation trickled by in a haze of cleaning and strained goodbyes. Corinne and Brendan helped clear the table while Ethan and Georgia retreated upstairs to the guest room to put Lily down to sleep. Marianne, her hands soapy from scrubbing dishes, played the scene over in her mind, Georgia's harsh words, her own impulsive reveal, Ethan's pained expression. She felt a confusing blend of relief and regret. Relief that the truth was finally in the open, and regret that it had exploded so publicly. Around midnight, she found herself alone in the living room, the chandelier's gentle glow casting elongated shadows on the walls. She stared at the empty plates and half-drunk glasses of wine scattered on the sideboard. This was supposed to be a joyous feast, a celebration of Lily's life. Instead, it had felt like a funeral for the remnants of trust within her family. Quiet footsteps pulled Marianne from her thoughts. Turning, she saw Corinne approaching, her face etched with concern. I was about to head out, but I just wanted to check on you, Corinne whispered. She glanced toward the stairs. Ethan told me they're spending the night here. It's late. Marianne offered a small, weary smile. Thank you. I appreciate you staying to help clean up. She set a wine glass down and sank onto a nearby armchair, feeling the exhaustion of the day weigh on her bones. Corinne sat across from her, leaning forward. What Georgia did, it was uncalled for, but I can't help wondering if there's more to her story. She seemed so angry, so threatened. She paused, trying to find the right words. I know you've tried to be fair, Marianne, but do you think you and Georgia just got off on the wrong foot from the start? Marianne sighed. It was a question she'd asked herself 1,000 times. I tried, she said, her voice tinged with a defensive edge. I accepted her into our family, but from the beginning, it felt like she was pushing me away. She questioned everything I did, acted like I was interfering. And yes, maybe I hovered sometimes. I'm a mother, after all. But I never intended to run their lives. Corinne nodded sympathetically. I understand. Sometimes two strong personalities clash, and if you throw money and inheritance into the mix, it gets explosive. Are you sure Lawrence's trust structure is the real issue? Though, could there be something else Georgia resents? Before Marianne could answer, the front door creaked open, revealing Brendan, who had stepped outside to make a phone call. Hey, you two, he said gently. I'm going to head home. Everyone's gone. Ethan asked me to let you know he'll talk to you in the morning. Once Corinne and Brendan departed, the house felt eerily quiet. Marianne turned off the chandelier, letting only the soft glow of a table lamp remain. She tried to imagine what Ethan and Georgia were doing upstairs, if they were quietly fighting, or if Lily's soft breathing was enough to keep the peace for the moment. With a slow, deliberate pace, she made her way to her bedroom, feeling the phantom presence of Lawrence in the hallway. He'd always been the calm, logical one, the buffer between Marianne's maternal instincts and Ethan's independence. If he were here, would things have unfolded differently? Her eyes fell on a photograph of Lawrence propped on her bedside table. I hope you know I'm trying, she murmured. She wanted so badly to maintain unity, yet she also knew that if she continued to ignore certain red flags, the entire family could suffer an even worse fallout down the line. With a heavy heart, Marianne turned off the lamp, hoping that tomorrow might bring a chance at reconciliation, or, at least, clearer understanding. Morning light filtered into the house, revealing the disarray left by the previous night's dramatic events. Marianne woke early, compelled by restlessness, and began tidying up the dining area and living room. She wanted to restore some semblance of normalcy before Ethan and Georgia emerged from their makeshift sleeping quarters upstairs. A fresh pot of coffee brewed in the kitchen, filling the air with a comforting aroma that contrasted with the tension still lingering like stale smoke. Just as she was rinsing a dish in the sink, she heard soft footsteps on the stairs. Expecting Ethan, she glanced over her shoulder, but it was Georgia, holding Lily in her arms. The baby was awake, her bright eyes scanning the world with newborn curiosity. Marianne offered a tentative smile. Good morning. Can I get you some coffee? She asked, her voice as gentle as she could manage. Georgia's eyes flickered with uncertainty. For a moment, she seemed to consider a harsh retort, but instead she nodded. Sure, thank you. She placed Lily in a portable bassinet on the kitchen table, ensuring the baby was secure, then took a seat. Marianne poured 2 mugs of coffee, sliding one toward Georgia, though she wasn't sure if her daughter-in-law would even drink it. An uneasy silence filled the room, punctuated by Lily's occasional coos. Marianne decided to break it, her tone calm. Georgia, I don't want us to be enemies. I never did. Whatever happens with the trust or your marriage to Ethan, Lily is my granddaughter. She stopped, weighing her words carefully. I just want everyone to be safe and provided for. That's it. Georgia took a slow sip, her eyes lowered. I don't hate you, she whispered after a pause. Sometimes I just feel like I'm under a microscope. Maybe that's my own insecurity. I don't know. She exhaled, pressing her lips together. As for the spending, I grew up poor. Like, not enough food on the table poor. When I married Ethan, It felt like a chance to finally have nice things, to never worry again. But then I discovered how locked down everything was: the trust, the conditions, your oversight. It felt like you were punishing me for wanting more. Marianne listened, absorbing the raw honesty in Georgia's voice. "I'm sorry you felt that way," she said sincerely. "Lawrence and I were never wealthy by birth. We worked for everything we had. If anything, we understand what it's like to be unsure about the future. That's precisely why the trust is set up the way it is, to protect from rash decisions." Before Georgia could respond, Ethan entered the kitchen, his hair tousled and eyes tired. "Morning," he said, taking in the sight of his wife and mother at the same table. Lily let out a small gurgling noise, drawing his attention. He approached the bassinet, brushing a soft hand over Lily's head. A gentle smile briefly lit his features. She slept surprisingly well, all things considered. He took a seat next to Georgia, reaching for the coffee mug. With a deep sigh, he turned to Marianne. "I want to see those documents again. Mom, I want to make sense of all this." His voice was firm but not accusatory. Marianne nodded, inwardly grateful that he hadn't stormed out or taken a strictly defensive stance. "Of course, they're in the study. You can look through them as long as you need." Georgia looked away, tension returning to her posture. "Are we going to make a big legal case out of this? Because I can't." Ethan shook his head, cutting her off with surprising gentleness. "Let me read everything first. Then we'll talk about how to proceed. I need clarity." Marianne noticed Georgia glance at her phone nervously as it buzzed with a notification. She quickly silenced it and tucked it away, a flash of anxiety crossing her face. It was a small moment, but it made Marianne wonder if there was more to Georgia's financial activities than they'd discovered so far. In the hush that followed, Marianne realized that this might be their chance, a sliver of hope that they could address the underlying issues without another blow-up. Yet she knew the road ahead would be fraught, especially if deeper secrets lay buried beneath Georgia's resentment. For now, though, they had a fragile truce, bound by coffee, a baby's presence, and the worn pages of financial statements waiting in the study. Ethan spent the better part of the morning poring over documents in the study. Georgia paced back and forth, occasionally pausing to check on Lily or to stare at her phone, as though waiting for some urgent message. Bustling. Marianne kept her distance, deciding to dust the shelves in the living room, anything to keep busy while Ethan reviewed the stark financial realities. Every so often, Marianne would pause mid-swipe, holding her breath, wondering if she should go ask Ethan how he was doing, or if she should leave him be. At one point, when Georgia stepped outside to take a call, Marianne observed her through the window. Georgia was gesturing animatedly, her face tense. When she returned, her expression was guarded, and she quickly deflected Ethan's question about who had called. Finally, around noon, Ethan emerged, clutching a handful of papers. His expression was grim, yet resolute. He approached Marianne, who had just set down her dusting cloth, and gestured for her to sit on the couch. "Mom, can we talk, Georgia? Can you join us?" he called, looking back toward the study. Georgia stepped out, crossing her arms defensively. Marianne noticed the dark circles under her daughter-in-law's eyes, the telltale signs of stress. She also saw the way Georgia's gaze lingered on the papers in Ethan's hand, as if expecting the worst. They all settled in the living room, Ethan in an armchair, Georgia perched on the edge of the couch, and Marianne on the opposite end, a careful distance away. Ethan cleared his throat. "So, I've seen enough to know that, yes, Georgia has been trying to access the trust in ways that violate the terms. Several large purchases stand out as questionable. But," he raised a finger, "I also see some places where we genuinely needed funds, like unexpected car repairs and medical bills for Lily's pediatric visits, and it looks like those were all denied because they weren't pre-approved through you. Mom, Marianne sighed. I didn't know about those repairs. You never asked me. And that's the problem, Ethan said, his voice quavering with frustration. None of this has been communicated properly. It's all gone through hush-hush channels, either behind your back or behind Georgia's back. He rubbed his temples. We can't keep doing this. It's tearing us apart. Georgia's lip trembled slightly, and she blinked hard. Ethan, I'm sorry if I went about it the wrong way. I just, I didn't want your mother controlling every financial decision we make. But I see now that I messed up. I should have talked to you first. Marianne placed a hand on her chest, feeling a dull ache there. Lawrence set the trust up this way because he was worried about misuse, but maybe we missed the mark on how it should be managed on a day-to-day basis. I'm open to finding a better solution. Ethan. Ethan set the papers on the coffee table. So, here's what I propose. We create a transparent system where Georgia and I submit requests related to Lily's care or family necessities, and you, as trustee, have to respond within a reasonable time. If the request is clearly within the guidelines, it's approved. If it's borderline, we discuss. That way, no one feels blindsided. Marianne felt a surge of hope. That sounds fair. I would be relieved to have clarity, too. Then she hesitated, eyes shifting to Georgia. But Georgia, I have to ask, are there any other credit cards or loans you've taken out in Ethan's name or jointly that he doesn't know about? Georgia opened her mouth, looking caught off guard by the direct question. No, she finally said, but her eyes flickered with something akin to panic. Well, there was one store account I opened, but I never used it, honestly. Ethan shook his head, exhaling a weary breath. We need full disclosure, Georgia. No more surprises. Georgia glanced at her phone again, which had been buzzing intermittently. I need to take this, she muttered, rising quickly and stepping out of the room. Ethan and Marianne exchanged concerned looks. I'm worried there's more we don't know, he said quietly. Marianne nodded. Ethan, it might be wise to check your credit report, just to be safe. He grimaced. I already planned to, and I'll be going through our bank statements more carefully from now on. His voice hardened with resolve. I love Georgia, but I need to protect Lily's future. For a brief second, Marianne thought she saw relief in Ethan's eyes, as though he had been waiting for the chance to take more control. Yet the tension in the air remained. They had a plan, at least in principle, but the hurt and mistrust were still fresh wounds. Marianne gently patted Ethan's shoulder. This is a start, she said softly. But we have a lot to rebuild. We can't just fix all this in a day. When Georgia returned, she seemed calmer, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. Marianne couldn't shake the lingering sense that there was more to uncover. Sometimes, big secrets hide behind smaller ones, waiting for the right moment to emerge. For now, though, she tried to focus on the progress they had made an agreement to communicate, a willingness to make the trust guidelines clearer. That alone was a step forward, albeit on shaky ground. In the days that followed, the household settled into a tenuous calm. Ethan and Georgia returned to their own home across town, but Marianne noticed a shift in the dynamic. Ethan visited more often, usually dropping by after work to pick up some documents or simply to check on his mother. Georgia, for her part, seemed polite, though reserved. She kept conversations short, focusing on Lily's milestones, the baby's first smile, her improved sleeping schedule, the new cooing sounds she made when she was happy. Marianne tried to maintain a welcoming atmosphere, offering tea or coffee whenever Georgia came by. But she couldn't entirely quell her lingering unease. Late at night, She would pore over the trust documents, wondering if they needed more than just a transparent request system. Perhaps they needed to revisit the entire estate plan with a lawyer to ensure no loopholes remained. The last thing she wanted was another ugly confrontation that might permanently damage her relationship with her granddaughter. Meanwhile, Ethan had taken it upon himself to become more financially aware. He'd begun setting aside time each week to review their accounts, track expenses, and ensure everything was in order. He had also checked his credit report, as Marianne suggested, but had mentioned nothing unusual, at least, not to her. One evening, while Marianne was watering the roses in her backyard, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen to see Ethan's name. "Mom, I need to talk to you," he said, his tone hushed as if he didn't want Georgia to overhear. "Are you free right now?" Marianne's heart skipped a beat. She set down the watering can and went inside to speak privately. "Is something wrong?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Ethan took a breath. "I found some credit card statements tucked away in one of George's desk drawers, ones I've never seen before. There are charges going back months, and they're in my name." Marianne felt a chill run through her. "Your name? But I thought we resolved the issue of hidden credit lines." "I thought so too. After our talk, I decided to do a thorough check of our finances. I went through bank statements, credit reports, everything, but these statements weren't showing up anywhere online. They were physical copies, hidden in a folder labeled Household Receipts. I only found them because I was cleaning out the desk." "How much are we talking about?" Marianne asked, her voice dropping. "Thousands," Ethan replied grimly. "Nearly 15,000 in the last 3 months alone. Designer clothes, jewelry, even a weekend getaway that was booked for next month that I knew nothing about." Marianne closed her eyes, leaning against the kitchen counter for support. A surge of protective anger welled up in her. "You're sure it's not from an older account?" "Positive. The statements show recent dates. Georgia's not even hiding them well. It's like she doesn't care if I find out anymore." Marianne took a steadying breath, remembering her vow to maintain composure and handle this systematically. "We need to address this properly. Ethan, first, gather all the documents and see exactly what we're dealing with. Then talk to an attorney. If Georgia's opening lines of credit in your name without your permission, that's—" "I know," Ethan cut in, his voice trembling. "It could be fraud, but I'm not ready to think about legal charges against my own wife. We have Lily to consider." He paused, voice breaking. "I love her, Mom, even if she's done some really questionable things." Marianne's chest tightened. This was every parent's nightmare, to see your child caught in a relationship that might be harmful, yet be powerless to fix it. "Okay," she said softly. "Just remember, I'm here. We'll figure out a solution that protects you and Lily. And if Georgia is truly in over her head, maybe this is a wake-up call for her to get help." After they ended the call, Marianne sat quietly, staring at her reflection in the kitchen window. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in a mosaic of orange and purple. How did we get here, she wondered. How did we go from celebrating Lily's birth to investigating hidden debts and potential fraud? She pressed a hand to her heart, silently asking Lawrence for guidance. Come morning, she knew there'd be a new confrontation on the horizon, one that might fracture their family beyond repair, if not handled with extreme care. Night gave way to a bright but chilly morning. Marianne awoke with a knot in her stomach, anticipating the difficult conversation that loomed. By mid-afternoon, Ethan arrived at her doorstep, Lily in his arms. Marianne noticed how weary he looked, the slope of his shoulders, the dark crescents under his eyes. Yet he still managed a tender smile when Lily reached out for her grandmother. "Hello, sweetheart," Marianne cooed, taking Lily gently into her arms. The baby babbled in contentment, and Marianne felt a pang of sadness that such innocence was entangled in adult conflicts. Ethan set down a folder on the coffee table. "Here," he said, sinking into an armchair. "The statements I found, there's over $15,000 charged on these cards just in the last 3 months. Luxury items, designer clothes, even a weekend getaway resort booking I know nothing about." Marianne sat on the couch, Lily cradled in her lap. She glanced at the numbers, each more shocking than the last. "Have you confronted Georgia yet?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Not fully. I told her I saw some suspicious charges, but she brushed it off, saying they were gifts or expenses for Lily. But I've looked at every single charge. No baby items, no grocery runs, no medical bills. It's all high-end consumer stuff. I didn't push further because, well, Lily was right there. I don't want to fight in front of her." Marianne understood. She handed Lily a soft toy to keep her occupied. "I wish I had an easy answer for you," she said. "But this can't go on. It's damaging your credit, Ethan, and financially, you'll be the one held responsible if it's in your name." Ethan pressed a hand to his forehead. "I know. Part of me wants to give Georgia the benefit of the doubt that maybe there's some explanation. But the more I look at it, the more it seems like she's just spending wildly." "Has she shown any signs of other problems?" Marianne asked cautiously. "Depression, anxiety, sometimes excessive spending can be a symptom of deeper issues." Ethan considered this. "She's been more distant lately, constantly on her phone, jumpy when I ask her about it. I assumed it was just stress from being a new mom." He sighed deeply. "I should have paid more attention." Marianne placed a supportive hand on Ethan's arm. "Did you contact the estate lawyer? Maybe there's a way to protect your personal assets from any further unauthorized debt." He nodded. "I have an appointment tomorrow. I was hoping you could come with me. I need another set of eyes and ears. Maybe we can figure out how to restructure the trust or freeze certain assets until this is resolved." Marianne's heart ached for her son. "Of course, I'll be there," she said. "But what about Georgia? She won't take this kindly if she feels we're going behind her back." "I don't see another option," Ethan muttered, glancing at Lily. "Look at her. She deserves a stable future." At that moment, Lily let out a delighted squeal, wiggling in Marianne's arms. Marianne smiled down at her, tears pricking the edges of her eyes. "Yes, she does," Marianne whispered, kissing Lily's forehead. "Ethan, I'll support you however I can. But I also think you need to have an honest conversation with Georgia, even if it's painful." He exhaled, nodding slowly. "Yeah, I just need a plan first." As Marianne transferred Lily back to his arms, she couldn't help but think of the illusions that had shattered since that disastrous family dinner. The veneer of civility had been stripped away, revealing secrets that threatened to tear them all apart. And yet, there was a strange sense of clarity in the ruin. Ethan knew what he was dealing with now, and Marianne understood the lengths she might have to go to protect him. No more half measures. No more polite avoidance. Reality had arrived, demanding confrontation, and there was no turning back. The appointment with the estate lawyer, Priscilla Palmer, proved eye-opening. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s, with rimless glasses and a calm demeanor that exuded competence. Seated in her sleek office, Ethan presented the evidence of Georgia's unauthorized credit lines, while Marianne listened, occasionally adding context about the trust's provisions. Priscilla reviewed the documents methodically, flipping through each page as though she were unearthing secrets in an archaeological dig. Ethan, she said finally, folding her hands on the polished oak desk. This is serious. If these accounts were opened without your permission, it could be grounds for fraud. But the personal and marital implications are even more complex. Have you considered marriage counseling or financial mediation with Georgia? Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I have. But first, I need to protect Lily and myself. If she keeps racking up debt, it could sink us. I'm not looking to send her to jail or anything like that, but I need a firewall. Mom and I were wondering if we can restructure the trust or freeze assets until we figure this out. Priscilla nodded gravely. We can add temporary restrictions to the trust, requiring co-approval from you and Marianne for any disbursements. That's possible, though it might anger Georgia further if she perceives it as an act of aggression. Are you prepared for that? Ethan glanced at Marianne. I don't have a choice, he said quietly. She's already shown she'll try to circumvent the trust or open lines of credit. I can't let this spiral out of control. Leaning back, Priscilla typed a note on her computer. All right, I'll start drafting the necessary paperwork. In the meantime, Ethan, you should consider contacting each credit bureau to place fraud alerts on your accounts. That way, if Georgia or anyone else tries to open a line of credit in your name, you'll be notified. How long will this process take? Ethan asked, his voice strained. The trust modification should be ready for signature within a week, Priscilla replied. The fraud alerts can be placed immediately, but remember, these are just protective measures. They don't address the underlying issues in your marriage. I know, Ethan admitted. I'm going to suggest counseling to Georgia, but I'm not optimistic she'll agree. Marianne felt a wave of gratitude for the lawyer's clarity, but also a sinking heaviness. This was no longer a mere family spat. It was a full-blown legal safeguard. She spoke up, her voice tinged with worry. Priscilla, do you think it's wise for Ethan to consider a separation until they can sort this out? I don't want to push that on him, but I'm scared for Lily and for him. Ethan looked pained. Mom, Priscilla's eyes darted between them. I can't make that call for you. However, in cases like this, establishing separate residences can protect you financially, but it also has implications for custody and the emotional well-being of Lily. My advice: try to resolve this through open communication first, if at all possible. If Georgia is willing to get help, perhaps therapy or financial counseling, you might salvage the marriage. Leaving the lawyer's office, Ethan seemed drained yet resolute. Thank you for coming, Mom, he said, as they stepped onto the sidewalk. I'm sorry you have to watch all this unravel. Marianne gripped her purse strap. You have nothing to apologize for. I'm just sorry you're going through it. In the distance, gray clouds gathered, a hint of an approaching storm that mirrored the inner turmoil they both felt. Priscilla mentioned this could take a week, Ethan said, his voice hollow. That's a long time for Georgia to potentially open more credit lines or make more charges. Maybe you should talk to her tonight, Marianne suggested gently. Be honest about what you found and what steps you're taking. Ethan nodded, his expression somber. I will. I just hope she's willing to listen. Neither of them spoke on the drive home, each lost in thoughts of what might happen next. Marianne tried to imagine a scenario in which Georgia would calmly agree to therapy, or repent for her actions, or at least try to mend the trust. Yet, in her heart, Marianne sensed that Georgia was more likely to lash out. Brace yourself for the storm, she told herself silently, because it's definitely coming. 2 days later, Marianne's prediction proved accurate. So, she was in her living room, sorting through old photo albums lost in nostalgia over pictures of Ethan's first birthday, when a frantic pounding sounded at her front door. She hurried to answer, heart thumping. Standing on her porch, looking disheveled and furious, was Georgia. She clutched a rolled-up sheaf of papers in one hand and a large tote bag slung over her shoulder. "You had no right," Georgia shrieked, pushing past Marianne to stride into the foyer. She flung the papers onto a nearby table, and they fanned out like fallen leaves. This freeze on the trust you and Ethan have essentially locked me out of everything." Marianne closed the door, fighting to keep her composure. "Georgia, calm down. We did what we had to do to protect Ethan and Lily. If you've done nothing wrong, then you shouldn't be worried about the trust's restrictions." "Nothing wrong," Georgia's eyes blazed. "You call forcibly restricting our family's finances. Nothing. Ethan has no right to shut me out of decisions." Marianne inhaled slowly, remembering Priscilla's advice to keep things civil. "He's not shutting you out. You'll still have access for legitimate expenses, but the trust now requires his and my co-signature, so we can avoid any more unauthorized debts." Georgia's throat bobbed in anger. She stepped closer, her tone dropping to a hiss. "You've wanted to drive me away from the moment we met. You never wanted me to marry Ethan, and now you've found your excuse." "That's not true," Marianne said, though her voice trembled under the weight of Georgia's accusation. "I just want to protect my son and granddaughter. I invited you into this family with open arms. You're the one who decided to make questionable financial moves." "Questionable?" Georgia snatched one of the papers from the table. "Mistake. Is it questionable to want a better life for your family? To not live paycheck to paycheck like my parents did?" Her voice cracked. "You have no idea what it's like to grow up with the constant fear of bills piling up." Marianne felt a pang of sympathy, but she refused to let it overshadow the reality of the situation. "Georgia, I understand financial anxiety. I've been there, but forging credit in Ethan's name and trying to break the trust's rules isn't the solution." Georgia's eyes flashed. "Where's Ethan? I want to talk to him, not you." "He's at work," Marianne said curtly. "He knows you'd be upset, but he felt it was safer to let the lawyer handle communications so things wouldn't get like this." She gestured at Georgia's agitated posture. Georgia scoffed. "Safer for him to hide behind a lawyer. You mean he's scared to face me because he knows he's in the wrong?" At that moment, the faint sound of Lily crying from the car outside drifted through the open door. Georgia spun around, as though she'd forgotten the baby was there, and rushed out. Marianne followed, concerned that Lily had been left alone. Peering into the car, she saw Lily strapped in her car seat, tears streaking her tiny face. Georgia unbuckled the baby, cradling her to her chest with trembling arms. "Shh, sweetheart, Mama's here," she cooed, tears of her own threatening to spill. Marianne stepped back, feeling torn. She wanted to soothe Lily, but the hostility rolling off Georgia was palpable. So she stood there, on the porch, watching the daughter-in-law she once hoped to bond with, now a stranger, locked in her own furious world. This is what it's come to, Marianne thought sadly, fighting over money in front of a crying baby. If there was a path to reconciliation, it seemed narrower by the minute. "Georgia," Marianne said softly, "please bring Lily inside. It's too cold for her out here." To her surprise, Georgia nodded curtly and followed her back into the house. Once inside, she settled on the couch, rocking Lily gently. The baby's cries subsided to hiccuping sobs. Marianne kept her distance, unsure of what to say or do. "I didn't want any of this," Georgia said suddenly, her voice small. "I just wanted us to be happy." "We all want that," Marianne replied. "But happiness built on secrets and lies isn't sustainable." Georgia looked up, eyes hard again. "You don't know everything about me or my situation." Then help us understand, Marianne pleaded. Talk to Ethan. See a financial counselor together. There must be a way forward that doesn't involve more deception. Georgia said nothing, her focus returning to Lily. After a few moments of silence, she rose. I need to go. Tell Ethan. Tell him I'll call him later. As Georgia left with Lily, Marianne couldn't shake the feeling that this confrontation was just the beginning of a much larger storm. Days stretched into weeks, and the tension between Georgia and Ethan reached a breaking point. It started with a phone call that Marianne never wanted to receive. Mom, Ethan said in a low voice. Georgia left. She took Lily and moved out. She left a note saying she can't live like this with you controlling our finances. His voice broke at the last word, and Marianne's heart shattered with empathy. She tried to piece together sentences of comfort, but Ethan was too distraught to speak further. He ended the call abruptly, leaving Marianne numb. In the ensuing days, Marianne discovered that Georgia had not simply moved to a friend's house. She had rented an apartment across town, one with a short-term lease, and was filing for full custody of Lily. Her legal argument that Ethan was unstable and under the undue influence of his controlling mother. The accusations stung, feeling both surreal and cruel. When Marianne learned from Ethan that Georgia was blocking his attempts to see Lily, she was outraged. She can't do that. Ethan, you have rights as Lily's father. I know, he replied, his voice hollow. My lawyer says we'll need to go to court for a temporary custody order, but that could take weeks. Each day without Lily seemed to drain more life from Ethan. He had thrown himself into his work, staying late at the office to avoid coming home to an empty house. But when he did visit Marianne, she could see how the separation was wearing on him. Ethan arrived on Marianne's doorstep one evening, his face gaunt from lack of sleep. Mom, I don't know what to do. She's refusing to let me see Lily until the court date. I talked to a lawyer, but you know how these things can drag out. Marianne ushered him inside, offering him tea he barely touched. Your father and I always wanted you to have a stable, happy family, she said softly. I never imagined it would come to this, but if Georgia is using Lily as leverage. She trailed off, the idea too painful to speak aloud. Ethan shook his head, tears gathering in his eyes. I love Lily more than anything. Mom, I can't stand not holding her, not seeing her. And Georgia, she was my wife. I still love her, but I can't accept what she's doing. Marianne placed a comforting arm around her son. Then fight for Lily. Fight with everything you have. I'll help in any way I can. Over the next several weeks, legal filings stacked up like a fortress of paperwork. Georgia's allegations were harsh, painting Marianne as an overbearing mother who had manipulated Ethan into isolating her from family assets. Marianne countered with documented evidence from the trust, showing how funds were misused. Brendan and Corinne provided statements attesting to Marianne's character. Priscilla, the estate lawyer, worked tirelessly alongside Ethan's family attorney to ensure that the trust's records were transparent and that no wrongdoing could be pinned on Marianne. Ethan had tried repeatedly to reach out to Georgia directly, bypassing the lawyers. I just want to see my daughter, he had pleaded during one phone call, but Georgia had remained firm, insisting that all communication go through legal channels until the court hearing. The emotional toll was evident in both Ethan and Marianne. Ethan had lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Marianne found herself unable to sleep, often standing in her kitchen at night, hugging an old teddy bear Ethan used to love, silently praying for a resolution that would bring Lily back home. Then, one morning, a surprise arrived in the form of a letter. It was from Georgia, delivered via courier. The note read, in succinct lines, that she was willing to meet outside of court if Marianne and Ethan agreed to certain conditions, chiefly that Marianne relinquish her role as trustee over the portion of the trust allocated to Lily. This felt like a trap to Marianne, but Ethan saw a glimmer of hope. "Maybe she's willing to negotiate," he said, eyes searching his mother's. "What if we can settle this privately and spare Lily from all the courtroom drama?" Marianne hesitated, remembering Lawrence's protective measures. She didn't want to unravel the trust entirely, allowing Georgia free rein, but she also recognized that Lily's welfare might depend on compromise. "Let's see what the lawyers say," she whispered, trying to keep a fragile hope alive. Ethan nodded, a spark of determination in his eyes. "I'm going to call her directly. I need to hear her voice, understand what she really wants." Later that day, Ethan reported back from his phone conversation with Georgia. "She sounds different," he said, his brow furrowed. "Less angry, more resigned. She mentioned something about realizing what's important. I'm not sure what to make of it." "Did she let you speak to Lily?" Marianne asked. Ethan shook his head. "No, but she promised I could see her at the mediation. Mom, I think there's more going on here than we know." "Something's changed." Marianne nodded thoughtfully. "Let's proceed cautiously, but with an open mind." After consulting with their lawyers, they agreed to Georgia's request for mediation. The date was set for 1 week later, with both sides instructed to come prepared with reasonable demands and concessions. A month later, the day of negotiation finally arrived. The scene was set in a calm, neutral conference room at a mediation center, an unremarkable place filled with pastel walls and a long wooden table. Marianne and Ethan sat on one side, Georgia on the other, each accompanied by their respective lawyers. Lily was at home with a court-appointed nanny, a measure taken to keep her away from the heated environment. Marianne observed Georgia carefully as they waited for the mediator to arrive. Her daughter-in-law looked tired, her eyes framed by faint shadows. There was no sign of the elegant dresses or designer handbags that once fueled her expenses. She wore simple, neutral-toned clothing, her hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Marianne couldn't tell if this transformation stemmed from genuine remorse or from strategic image management in preparation for a custody case. The mediator, a gentle-faced woman named Amanda, took her seat and invited everyone to introduce themselves. After pleasantries, she reviewed the issues at hand: custody of Lily, the trust structure, and allegations of financial misconduct. The air felt thick with unspoken tension, but Amanda's calm voice served as a metronome, urging them toward civility. Georgia spoke first, surprising Marianne by acknowledging her actions. "I did open credit lines in Ethan's name without his knowledge," she admitted, voice trembling. "I shouldn't have done that. I was desperate. I thought the trust was withholding what we needed. I've made mistakes." She paused, fiddling with her lawyer's pen. "But I'm not a monster. I just want Lily to have the life I never had." Ethan swallowed hard, shifting in his chair. "Georgia, I appreciate your honesty, but you left with Lily, filed for full custody, and called me unstable. That broke my heart. I want joint custody. Lily needs both of us." The mention of custody cut through the air like a razor. Georgia wiped at the corner of her eye. "I was angry," she admitted, "and I felt cornered. The trust made me feel powerless. I panicked." She turned to Marianne. "I know you think I only care about the money, but that's not true. I love Ethan. I love Lily. I just never wanted to be in a situation where someone else decided my family's financial future." Marianne inhaled, recalling the numerous times she'd tried to empathize with Georgia's background. "I understand where you're coming from," she said carefully, But the trust was designed by Lawrence, not me, to protect Ethan and Lily. Still, if we can find a middle ground that safeguards them and respects your autonomy, I'm willing to talk. Amanda guided them through several proposals. The first was that Ethan and Georgia would share joint custody, with a schedule that allowed Lily ample time with both parents. The second involved revising the trust so that a third-party trustee, an impartial professional, would manage it, removing Marianne from the direct line of conflict. In exchange, Georgia would agree not to open further lines of credit without Ethan's explicit consent, and she would disclose all existing debts to be consolidated into a structured repayment plan. The discussions were lengthy and often heated. Georgia's lawyer argued passionately for maintaining some financial independence for his client. Ethan's attorney countered with detailed evidence of Georgia's financial misconduct. Both sides threatened to walk away at various points. This isn't just about money, Georgia insisted during one tense exchange. It's about dignity, about being treated as an equal partner in my marriage, and it's about honesty and trust, Ethan replied firmly, both of which have been broken. As the hours passed, Marianne found herself studying Georgia's expressions, searching for signs of sincerity. Was this woman who'd caused so much pain genuinely remorseful or simply cornered? It was impossible to tell. Finally, after nearly 6 hours of negotiation, they reached a tentative agreement. Ethan and Georgia would share joint custody of Lily, with Georgia as the primary residential parent initially, but with a structured schedule allowing Ethan significant time with his daughter. The trust would be managed by a neutral third-party trustee, with both Ethan and Georgia having input on major decisions regarding Lily's portion. Georgia agreed to financial counseling and complete transparency about all accounts moving forward. Marianne's heart fluttered at the idea of relinquishing her role as trustee. It felt like letting go of Lawrence's last protective measure. But seeing Ethan's pleading eyes, she realized it might be the only way to ensure Lily's future peace. As they finalized terms, Georgia looked across the table at Marianne, their eyes locked. In that moment, Marianne thought she saw a spark of something akin to genuine regret. I, I'm sorry, Georgia said hesitantly, for everything. I know I can't erase what I did, but I hope we can be family. Marianne's throat tightened. She wanted to believe Georgia's remorse was authentic. I hope so too, she managed, voice catching. When the final papers were signed, Ethan exhaled in relief. For the first time in weeks, Marianne saw a glimmer of hope in her son's face. The path ahead wouldn't be smooth. Trust lost is never regained overnight, and the scars from betrayal can linger. But at least Lily's future seemed more secure, and perhaps, in the wake of so many harsh truths, they could build something stronger. If only they all had the will to learn and forgive. Later, in a private moment before leaving, Ethan pulled Georgia aside for a conversation that Marianne couldn't hear. They spoke intimately, with Georgia occasionally dabbing at her eyes. When they rejoined the group, something had shifted between them, not reconciliation, exactly, but perhaps the first tentative step toward understanding. Outside the mediation center, the afternoon sun cast long shadows on the pavement. Marianne paused, looking up at the sky, recalling Lawrence's unwavering devotion to family. She hoped he would approve of the compromise. Then she turned to Ethan, who cradled Lily in his arms, and Georgia, who nervously hovered beside them. "Let's go home," Marianne said gently, her words heavy with the promise of cautious new beginnings. And together, they walked away from the building uncertain. Yes, but also with a renewed sense that perhaps they could piece this fractured family back together, one careful step at a time. Epilogue. 6 months later, on a warm spring morning, Marianne sat on a park bench watching Ethan push Lily on a swing. The little girl's delighted giggles floated through the air, a sound that never failed to warm Marianne's heart. Georgia sat beside Marianne, both women maintaining a polite distance that had become their new normal. "She's growing so fast," Georgia remarked, her eyes fixed on Lily. Marianne nodded. "She is. She has your smile." And a tentative peace had settled between them in the months following the mediation. The new trust arrangement was working, with the professional trustee making fair decisions that respected both Ethan's concern for security and Georgia's desire for autonomy. Georgia had completed her financial counseling program and was working part-time while taking courses in early childhood education, a newfound passion she'd discovered while focusing more intently on Lily's development. Ethan and Georgia remained separated, though they had not yet filed for divorce. They co-parented with surprising effectiveness, their shared love for Lily overriding the lingering hurts of the past. Ethan had moved into an apartment close to Georgia's, ensuring he could be present for Lily's daily life while maintaining boundaries with his estranged wife. As for Marianne, she had found a new role as grandmother rather than protector. She focused on creating joyful memories with Lily while respecting the parenting decisions made by both Ethan and Georgia. It wasn't always easy, but it was better than the alternative, a bitter court battle that would have only wounded Lily in the long run. "Thank you," Georgia said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. "For what?" Marianne asked, surprised. "For being willing to compromise, for loving Lily enough to let go of control." Georgia hesitated. "I know I made terrible mistakes. I'm still paying for them literally and figuratively, but I'm grateful we found a way forward." Marianne studied Georgia's face, seeing genuine gratitude there. "We all make mistakes," she said softly. "What matters is how we learn from them." As they sat together, watching Lily's carefree play, Marianne reflected on the turbulent journey that had brought them here. Yes, son. The trust, both the financial instrument and the emotional bond, had been broken, then rebuilt in a different form. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Enough to ensure Lily would grow up surrounded by people who loved her, even if they didn't always love each other. And perhaps, Marianne thought, that was the most important trust of all. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Family relationships can indeed be complicated, and sometimes secrets have a way of surfacing when we least expect it. Thankfully, after all the heartache and misunderstandings, we found a way toward healing and forgiveness. But it wasn't easy. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this story. Do you think the decisions made were right? What would you have done differently if you were in my shoes? Please share your opinions in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's story, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell to keep supporting and following along for more amazing stories. See you next time.